Welcome to From Our Perspective, two therapists, moms, and a mic. I'm Katie Truax.
And I'm Claudia Glassman.
And we are going to talk to you today about back to school time. 'Tis the season, huh?
It is. When are you guys going back?
Wednesday, like 2
Oh,
days from today.
okay. We still have 2 weeks.
You do? I know.
Yeah.
So we went to Target yesterday and I was actually like thinking about you and thinking about our like Target is like this just mothership of like representation of just all things related to parenting, right? Remember you were saying about that time when you took Kinsey and she had just this huge meltdown. I was saying, oh my gosh, I have a client who like literally like Target is like her biggest fear is taking her kid to Target, and we did the Target back to school shopping yesterday.
Okay. Nice. Actually, that story came full circle because I was with Kenzie in Target yesterday. She had gotten money from a relative and she wanted to go see what there was to purchase. So I took her and there was a kid screaming bloody murder in line behind us. And she goes, "That child sounds very upset." And I'm like, yes,
Yes.
that happens. In fact, you and I have had that moment before. She doesn't remember it, but I was like, it was so nice to check out like a human, and she's commenting on this kid losing it, and she is not the one losing it. So it gets better, is my point. Eventually, it gets better.
Gosh, we had a little bit of a rough one, but I feel like my kid is very reliant on surprise, surprise, right? Sleep, food, and she's been a little under the weather this week. I don't know what she got. She either picked something up from a friend who came back from camp with something, or I don't know, she and her dad think that maybe they got some sort of like bacteria, something from the water. There was kind of some yuckiness kind of pushing through, but she was kind of like congested and she had a fever for 24 hours on what day was that? Was that Friday? Thursday or Friday? Thursday. It was Thursday. So by Sunday, she was like, well, outside of that for sure, but you know how like kids, like even though they're not like quote unquote sick anymore, but they're still kind of like run down sometimes and
Yeah.
like don't know their limits, and it's hard for us to know their limits because they act like they don't have limits, but then they just like crash faster.
Yeah. They hit that wall and you're like, uh-oh, we
Yeah.
found it. Yeah.
We did that at Target quite a few times. And then this is mom win. I realized after I like had my little meltdown on top of her meltdowns, because I had to tell her 4 times about her attitude and her tone with me, that I had forgot to feed her lunch.
Oh God. Oh no.
Terrible. It's so bad because we kind of like, I don't know, you guys aren't like this because you're very meal oriented in your household.
We are.
And our household is not that way. We kind of like flow
Glaze.
through the day. Yeah. And then we have like, we'll kind of just all eat when we are hungry. And sometimes it's a meal and sometimes it's snacks, but like we had like a late-ish breakfast, and so it was kind of like a more of like a brunch type of experience, and then it was like mid-afternoon and my kid's like melting down and
Oh,
she's
God.
like, I feel like I need something hearty to eat. And I'm like, oh yeah, lunch. That's something we didn't
Oh my
do.
God. Yes, we are chronically hungry in this family, so we're very regimented in our meals. But every now and then, Kenzie is specifically vulnerable to blood sugar, like mean angry, and then she eats, and it's like a complete 180. Yeah, and she's starting to recognize that mood shift for herself. She can't control it, but she's starting to recognize like, oh, I am nasty when I'm hungry. But yeah, oh well, can't blame her for an attitude if you forgot to give her lunch.
That's right.
Yeah. So do you guys, I know like for me, this back to school prep has changed a little bit as my kids have gotten older. They've become more flexible in a lot of ways. So I think I prepare them a little bit differently. But I do know there's a couple of things. So we're trying now. Like I said, we have about 2 weeks before we need to get back on. And we have been all over the place this summer with our sleep schedules. The kids have been going to bed later, sleeping in, summer schedule. My goal at the beginning of summer was to keep the school year schedule in terms of sleeping and waking.
Yeah.
we failed like every other, it didn't happen. Camp starts at 9. I'm not waking them up at 7 for a 9 o'clock camp. Like, what are we doing? So we're starting now to backtrack the
Back
sleep.
in.
Yeah. So hopefully by the time we get to school, we're a little bit closer to normal sleep wake.
So how are you doing that? You're just gradually getting closer to your school sleep schedule. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's more my kids get up relatively early anyway. I mean, sleeping in for them is like 7:30, which is really not that much different from school.
Yeah.
It's the going to bed that we're backing up a little bit, just because they have to exert themselves at school and it's a longer day and it's a lot more to focus and, and I also know that in general, and this is actually true for us all year round, but I feel like the first like month of school, we have that like after school adjustment period where they're just tired, especially the first couple of weeks, like you pick them up and it's just been like, it's a long day and it's rough. And so we do a lot of like transition times after school, right? So it's like, I let them have quiet time after school to kind of regroup a little bit. And I think you've noticed, I don't know if I've talked to you a lot in the car on my way to pick up the kids, but it's been since they were little, and specifically Ansley is very, she likes to have my attention at pickup.
Yeah.
And connect. And if she does not have that, like if I'm on a phone or a meeting or multitasking, you can hear the growling in the back seat of like, get off the phone, and she doesn't really want to talk to me because she wants to decompress, but she wants me, I guess, present, even though I'm not doing anything. So it's getting back into that too, because that's for us, a very specific after school combination is the connecting and then the quiet drive home right, to let them kind of decompress.
Okay, so sleep schedule, wake schedule, being intentional about like setting your schedule or your work schedule and your meeting schedule and your social schedule around that quiet time after school.
Yeah.
What else does back to school prep look like in your family?
That's kind of it. I think my kids transition in and out of school fairly well, to be honest with you. Some of it I think is, and maybe you experience this too, because I know Ellie goes to a smaller school as well. The school, there's not a lot of anxiety about returning to school.
Yeah.
There's the like excitement, but it's not like they're with the same kids. They have the same teacher for a couple years. So it's like there's not a lot new every year. I will say the new years, like when they switch classrooms and there's a new teacher, those are a little more anxiety provoking for them. But for the most part, like it's a pretty smooth transition. But I do think for some kids, right, that anxiety of any child that struggles with change, or any person, right, that anxiety of new teacher, new peers, new classmates, maybe even a new school, probably requires some preparation.
Yeah. So what kind of preparation? I know, because I'm like thinking like, does Ellie express any of that? I mean, she does. I know she has some shifts in her teaching, but yes, I mean, so the way her school is structured is she's in what's called the middle, no, foundations, which is fourth, fifth, and sixth is foundations. So she's still in the same like group that she was in last year, but there are new kids coming in, and she did mention something about that today. This morning we took some time to I bought her a lot of new stuff at Target. My kid is a very slow grower, and she like doesn't get a lot of, and I'll say she doesn't ask for a lot of things. She's not very like I don't know. She's not a big shopper. She's not a big like has to have all the toys kind of a girl. Like she really never has been that way. And so she doesn't ask for a lot of things, but this year she wanted, like, here's a good example. Like last year, I think we bought her a new backpack and ended up being too small for all the things she needed. And she just like decided on her own, like to revert back to this old backpack that one of her grandmothers had given her years ago, which like had a rip in it, like a stain in it. I mean, it's like an old backpack, but she's like, I'm just gonna use this one, mom, So like this year, she's like, Mommy, I want a new backpack and I want a new lunchbox. Like she's had the same Planet Box for like years of school. Those things will last forever. That Planet Box will be around when she has grandkids. But
Yeah.
like she just wanted something new. And I was like, okay, like everybody needs new things. Or let me rephrase. How do I put that? Everybody deserves just to get a new thing, even if they don't need it, right? And so she was like, I want a new backpack and a new lunchbox and a new water bottle. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So we got all these new things in addition to the school supply list. And so this morning we're taking the tags off, and unfastening things and opening things up and unwrapping things and organizing. And she had the greatest little time. Like she was so excited about it, like this preparation for just getting ready to go back. And she doesn't have a lot of new clothes either. This kid, because she's the smallest of all of her friends, and I'm curious, like if you have the same experience because your kids are small in frame too.
Yeah.
But like she gets an amazing amounts and quality of hand-me-downs from 3 different families, and she's always like inundated with new to her, and so she has probably an obscene amount of clothing. Obscene, that's not a word. Insane. Obscene amount of clothing, but like very very little of it is clothing that like Ellie has chosen, you know what I mean? So again, to this point of like, she like yesterday she didn't happen to, but the Target trip prior, she's like, Mommy, can I get this one tie-dye t-shirt? I'm like, absolutely. Like, just because you have 100 t-shirts that have been handed down to you doesn't mean that you don't get to pick one out that you choose. So anyway, so she just like the excitement of new, right, that kind of like comes around at this back to school time, whether it's a new classroom or new things, or again, we didn't do the new clothes, thank God, because my Target bill was big enough, but
Yeah.
new teachers and all the new. And for us, it's been so far excitement, but I think, to your point, there could be anxiety there too and fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I feel like we as a family get to be a little bit lazy about the transition because their school does a great job transitioning.
Yep.
So they have it built in. So at the end, because we have cohorts like you do these 3 years, right? Fourth, fifth, and sixth grade is one grouping as well. So as they move up, the new kids, the fourth graders in this case, right, come in and it's a whole new bunch. They visit the classroom at the end of last school year, and they spend an entire day with their new classmates doing whatever they do. So your older child already knows their younger classmates, right? Then so my kids actually start school a little bit later than some of their peers. Anyone new to the classroom or the school starts 2 days earlier, and they have 2 days with a smaller environment in terms of people to and the teacher only has like the small group of kids to acclimate, and then the kids that coming back from the previous year kind of come in, they already know what's going on, so it's an easier transition. So those things, but like those school visits, we used to do the whole like pick your cubby visit when they were like little bitties. And I would have them, I think it's a lot of like preparation rituals, kind of like what you and Ellie were doing with kind of pulling the tags off and exploring all the new stuff, right? We would I remember doing this when they were really little. You had to do like the Ziploc bag of like the shoes and the socks and the undies. And then, do you remember that? I don't miss this. The whole outfit had to be like 3 outfits in case, like, I don't know, crisis happened.
Yeah.
And so like we used to make the little baggie, and they would pick what clothes they wanted, right? And there was that preparation. It looks different now because they're older, but it is sometimes the new lunchbox, which I don't think we're doing this year because we don't need this, but it's the new outfit, it's the, whatever the case may be. But there are some rituals we kind of have incorporated into like the back to school moments, which I think help, because that just is like a cue for our kids, right? That's familiar, even if something else is unfamiliar. So whatever that looks like, we have them for the end of the school year too. On the last day of school, it's a half day. I pick up my kids. I booked a client this year and they were not happy I didn't go. Adam took them, but I accidentally booked a client. So, but typically I pick them up and we all go to lunch together. And now they're saying it has to be the same place every year, which I didn't anticipate, but that's what they like, right? So any of those rituals I think are really helpful, like whatever that looks like in your family. Sometimes it's like a really nice breakfast together before the first day. We do first day pictures.
Time for that.
I don't, but this isn't my ritual, but it could be a ritual for those that are morning people.
5 a.m. I guess there are moms who do that. Yeah.
I'm not a morning person. So you know me, it's like I can get my cup of coffee and that's open my eyes and that's me. I don't even do that half the time. It's like I just go get them to school. But yeah, if you're a morning person, there's a lot of great stuff you can do before the first day of school in that morning.
That's probably, do you remember our first podcast and we were talking about this whole, like, was it the first one we were talking about kind of how we have like this mom guilt and we'll like compare ourselves to other people? Like I literally have images of these like uniquely shaped pancakes with like puffs of whipped cream on them, like waiting on this like perfectly set like dining table, you know, for this beautiful family where everybody's like matched and hair done and everybody's happy. Like, does that happen? Is that a thing?
Yes, I'm sure it is. It is not in our home. But you know, I'm sure it happens in someone's house. I think it just depends on like, you know, what your strengths are as a parent. That's not mine.
Maybe it's only on Instagram.
Maybe. Or like I do think I know families with more children that do operate that way, almost because it becomes like, how do you get 6 kids that are under, you know, 7 ready for school in the morning, right? So it does become a lot more regimented and a tighter ship. Our mornings can be a little more loosey-goosey. One kid can lay in bed for an extra 20 minutes while the other's up and ready because we don't have 8 of them to try to corral, right? Yeah. So like we can run a little bit of a more flexible schedule, I believe. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on these kids that, you know, there's always the natural transition back to school, right? So there's always a little bit of nerves, or maybe it's even excitement. And we do have a lot of conversations in our house because nervousness and excitement can physically feel the same in your body.
Yeah, totally.
And so we have a lot of conversations about trying to differentiate. Is it a nervousness or is it an excitement to get back to school? Because those are not the same thing, but they can manifest similarly, right? But for those kids that maybe are a little more anxious, right? Where new things, new school years, new teachers and all that are a little bit more of a challenge. What are your thoughts on kind of prepping that crowd?
Well, so are there still orientation days in the larger schools where it is more of a, you know, unlike what you and I experienced, our kids, you're in a new room with a new teacher and a completely new set of students. Do they still have those orientations where you kind of come and you see the space and you meet the teacher and so forth before school starts?
Yeah. So they're kind of like these drop by days. Now, I don't know if every county in the country does that, but I believe they exist. I mean, I know, you know, kiddos that up until like a couple weeks ago, I was like, do you even know who your teacher is next year? They're like, nope, like they don't even have that information yet, right? So some kids don't get their class lists until much later. We get ours in like April, early April. I think we know where the kids are going to be for the next year. But I'm thinking they still do. I mean, I hope they're doing that. But yeah, I mean, obviously utilizing those, right? Those drop by days. And I think as a parent, thinking through some of the anxieties, right? Like if you're dropping your kid off at carpool and you have the opportunity to do a drop by day, walking them through, you get out here, then we go, right? Like actually through the steps, because a lot of times we park in the parking lot, we grab our kid, we go to the classroom, but we didn't walk them through or remind them about the carpool process, right? Like remember, you go here and then whatever that it looks like at your school, because it looks different, right? And kind of walking them through a day, because some of those drop-bys are quick, right? It's like a few minutes. It's not necessarily a longer orientation.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of where my brain would go, would be to try to like think about how do you prepare mentally, right? Like, so, I mean, to me, and again, going back to maybe our first 1 or 2 podcasts, right? If we think of anxiety, I like to define it as the body's physiological mounting of the stress response in answer to a worry, right? So a thought or a fear that we have in our mind about something in the future. or I guess it could be something sometimes in the here and now, right? That something might be happening now, but typically it's something that's going to be happening, right? And in this topic, that's what we're talking about. What is it going to be like that day, right?
Yeah.
That week, in that new space with these new people? Who's going to be there? And the brain is creating some sort of negative scenario, right? So I think a couple things maybe come up for me. One is to not assume. I can't tell you if I had a nickel for every time I had a thought about what my daughter might be thinking. And if I asked her, it was something completely different from what
Yeah.
I would have thought she was thinking. And so, we all as adults had a childhood and had our own, you know, things that made us afraid or worried or scared or overwhelmed, right? Or confused. And maybe our kids have something very similar to what we had. Maybe they have an experience is very different. Maybe they're more easily worried or confused or overwhelmed, and maybe they're a lot less, or maybe it's about completely different things, right? And so I think
Yeah.
that before we make assumptions and kind of impose our own stuff onto our kids, whether it's that they are worried or not, maybe just checking it out with them and using like really open-ended questioning. Do you want to share, tell people what it means, what an open-ended question is, and like how that might look as opposed to say like a leading question when we ask our kids about stuff like this?
Yeah. So the like, are you nervous about school starting is
Mhm.
very leading. And
Yeah.
I mean, you could get a no, but you
Mhm.
don't get a lot of that gray area, right? The answer is yes or it's no. I guess I could say kind of, but how do you feel about school starting?
Mhm.
Then stop talking and listen. And
That's
I
right.
think like you're bringing up a really good point because I think there's so much about our kids transition back to school that like once we drop them off is so out of our hands, right? And like,
Mhm.
they just have to go. But I think if you do nothing else, right? We can't get rid of their anxiety or their worry or they just kind of have to move through it, right? At some point they have to face the first day of school, the first week of school, and then they move through it and they come through the other side. But there's no way to really get there except moving through it. But we
Right.
can create space for that dialogue, right? Or just space for them to express with no judgment of our own. And I think most importantly, not the minimizing
Mhm.
of, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's the same school. Why are you nervous? Right. It's like, because I am. I don't know why. It's not always rational. Right. But to really just to create a supportive dialogue around how they feel. So yeah, those open-ended questions, that's a great idea. To not lead them into saying they're anxious when they're not,
Mhm.
right? So if I ask my excited kid, are you nervous? She might be like,
Ooh.
maybe, yeah, because that feels like butterfly, right? And now I just gave her a feeling that she didn't actually own,
Right, you just put
or
it
it
in.
wasn't hers. I gave
That's
it to her.
right. Mhm.
Yeah. So those like, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts on it? Um, I think you can ask, like, is there anything you're worried about or excited for? I think you can ask those kind of questions. Those are a little leading, um, but they kind of sort out those feelings.
Well, and I think this is like my opinion, but I think that it's okay to ask for specific feelings, right? As long as we are conscious about balancing that, right?
Yeah.
So tell me what you're most excited about. Tell me what you're most afraid about. Tell me what you're most hopeful for. Tell me what makes you feel the most nervous, right? And as long as you're balancing, right, like a range of different emotional experiences. So it's not all, like sunshine and rainbows, and there's no room for any of the hard feelings. And it's not all kind of Debbie Downer, right? Where you're
Yeah.
maybe implanting, ooh, gosh, am I supposed to be feeling nervous? I didn't realize it, but mom sure thinks that I should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you were mentioning this before, but I think we each had our own experiences with school and our own anxieties, or no anxiety, maybe if that was you, but our own feelings about school. I know, my husband was highly anxious. Like he every Sunday night felt anxious and struggled transitioning back to school. He was like sensitive that way, right? That transition back was difficult for him. And he like really felt it in his gut.
Yeah.
and it sat with him. And so he has to be very careful not to bring that to our kids,
Mhm.
because for him,
Yeah.
even us talking about them going back to
Uh,
school brings up butterflies for him. And I'm like, you're not even attending, right? But also like really checking, your experiences and not imposing those, good or bad, right? Maybe you love school, but your kid's like, oh, I could take it or leave it, right?
yeah.
um, Onto your children. Yeah. And so what about those? So that kind of is for like older kids, right? Those that can have these kind of
Yeah.
conversations. I want to take you way back now. What about those that might be going to school for the first time? What about those mamas out there that are,
Ooh.
got the littles, and maybe it's starting kindergarten, maybe it's starting first grade, maybe we're doing, preschool, I don't know, but what are your thoughts on kind of that transition, if you can remember what that was like?
Ooh, like the very first. So we're talking like preschool or like kindergarten.
Kindergarten, yeah.
Oh man, I remember Ellie started preschool at Turning Sun in Decatur, Georgia when she was 2. And my kid was always like activity seeking. She always wanted to do more and go and be busy. And we started looking for things to do for her outside the home at a very, what I think is probably a pretty young age to try to like satiate some of that. And but I do remember feeling that guilt of leaving her really for the first time with anybody besides you, or like maybe like a grandma from here and there, but all of our family live very far away. So really you got my kid like more than anybody else did, and
Yeah.
I always felt safe with her being with you because we parented so similarly. Our philosophies on life and child development were so similar, and so I never ever worried about her being with you and being away from me. But when I would start like taking her to preschool, it's kind of like, okay, I was making a choice, right? and
Yeah.
and taking a huge leap of faith that when I wasn't there with her, she was going to be cared for sufficiently, right? Like, and thank God I quickly learned that I think they probably did a better job with her than even I did. This place was like utopia. It really was so beautiful. I hope it still is, but I say was because we're no longer there. They ended kindergarten and we moved away from Georgia when Ellie was 3, but she was there for a year and a half, and it was just such a beautiful experience. But initially, I was terrified. I was like, I felt guilty. I felt like so worried about what I wasn't able to see and hear and touch and taste and smell. But like she was fine. This kid was like, bye, peace out. Like she's never batted an eye about strange experiences. And I think, I don't know what episode this was. We talked about attachment styles at one point, and I'm grateful that I think that this ties back to that she has a secure attachment style, and knew we were going to come back and knew the world's a pretty safe place. And these people seem nice and they seem like they're having fun. So let's go do these things they're, doing that are fun. And
Yeah.
but I think that I probably had more anxiety than she did by far. By far. I mean, she scoop, 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 right? She loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was short, my anxiety was short-lived as soon as I saw the amazing things they were doing with her. Now, I do think that two things. One, you've heard me say how okay, she has a secure attachment style. Two, this was a beautiful environment for her. I could not have asked for anything better. And um, three, I had the choice, right? And so a lot of times those three conditions are not the same, right? So I don't know if my experience is really fair to even hold up as an example or even helpful. I mean, we could maybe brainstorm about, okay, if we put our professional hats on, right? And the mommy hats off, what might we advise? But from my personal experience, right? Because not all kids have a secure attachment style, right? We talked about some tend to be a little bit more anxious in style or ambivalent, right? And
And
then
some of it's temperament, right? Some
temperament,
kids
sure,
struggle with change of scenery or, change in
routine.
general.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, and we did not have a good
Yeah,
school experience for my oldest.
you didn't.
No.
I can't.
I It was terrible. So we found this school. We had her enrolled a little bit before 2 because I wanted her to start school before Kenzie was born so
Okay.
that, you know, and things went great in the little kids classroom. She switched classrooms. It was like 40 kids and it was like a free for all. And I came to pick her up and they said that she was sitting in the corner all day holding a blankie.
Oh, baby.
And that's not my kid. Like she's
Mhm.
still a super hyper active child.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, there's no way she spent an entire day sitting in a corner. Now, when she was in the little kids classroom, it was great. I would get pictures and she would be coloring and she loved school. This classroom, she was only in it for about a week or two. It happened to coincide with Kenzie's birth. So
Mhm.
I wasn't sure if she would say, no school, no school.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I mean, I just had a baby. That's hard.
Transitions.
Yes. And then I picked her up and I got this from the lady. And she's like, she's been in that corner all day. First of all, why didn't you call me? So
Right.
I took her out that day and she did not return to that school.
Uh-uh.
But if you said the word school, she would
Mm.
freak out.
Oh my gosh. Now, do you think it was, well, okay, so you said maybe it was because of Kinsey coming along and that big
No,
transition.
I think it was, I think they were mean. I think they yelled. I think they were out of control. I think it was too many kids in the class. When I
Yeah.
called the head of the school, she was like, well, we're splitting that classroom and we understand there's been some issues. So it wasn't, I don't
This,
think having a baby sister was helpful, but
mhm. Yeah.
so I called a Montessori school that I looked at previously, but they didn't start until 2 and she wasn't quite 2 yet. So I called them and I said, listen, I want to enroll her. And I'm like, she's terrified of school, like
Oh.
terrified of school. And it was a super small school run out of like a couple of hallways in a church
Mhm.
and cameras everywhere. So I would rush home to go on the camera to see how
Oh.
she's doing.
Oh.
And I mean, this teacher, this, large compared to these children, Haitian woman, and she
Mhm.
had a booming voice, and she was like, she would scoop, Ansley up and sit her on her lap, and she would just sit there and she would cry. And then
Oh.
she would regroup. And she didn't cry super long, but she cried when I left her. She cried while she was there. I would rush home to look at the camera. She'd be fine. She would cry at pickup when I would see her. She'd be like, "Mommy." Um, and I was very honest with the school that she was, whatever happened at this last place was an issue.
Mhm.
I mean, to the point where we didn't even call it school. We just said, you're going to Montessori. We
Yeah.
stopped using the word
Had to
school
change the
because if we said school, she would freak out.
uh-huh.
This place was so lovely and they were so understanding and so patient and they just, held her when they needed to hold her and like really, I mean, she was 2, she was a baby.
Right.
Um, and it quickly turned around to her loving school.
Good.
And she, now she's much older and she loves school. And honestly, I credit them and their patience and kindness to kind of shift it for her.
Yeah.
But she was little, she couldn't tell me what was going on. And
Mhm.
I wasn't told what was going on. And I'm sure other people have had scenarios where you find out that things are less than ideal when you show up. Um,
But that
but
is
like,
the fear, right? That's the fear. It's like, okay,
yeah,
until your kid's at that age or they can tell you what, you don't know, right? I mean,
yeah,
that was, you can't, like I'd said, not being able to touch, smell, taste, and see,
yeah,
what's happening with my baby.
yeah.
Yeah. And then
But we're okay, right? We're now
we're okay.
10. She loves school. I mean, I still get it like talking about it. I like there's a little bit of rage that like,
Yeah,
like
you
I
left my
feel
kid in
it,
the corner with a blanket. Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel the anger again and I feel that pit in my stomach of like, what the fuck is going on there? And I pulled her out quickly. I think I did the right things. And again, I landed in a place that was so nurturing. And we actually just went to visit last week when we were back down in Florida. And they bought a brand new school building and are renovating and moving in. And they are still as delightful as ever. And they invited my kids next time they're down and when the school's up and running to like come and do a day or two at their school just to hang out and like I mean, they're so kind. Um, so you can have a bad experience and then course correct is my point, right? Like there's sometimes those you drop your kid off and you realize this is a bad situation.
Mhm.
And then you take action to try to correct it. And in the end, like, I was like, oh my God, are we going to have a kid that hates school forever and ever and ever? And she doesn't. She loves school. And she's, now there was a time where she was struggled with that transition of going back to school. But I would say by the time she was like 4,
Mhm.
we were like way past that. Like she would get dropped off at school and be good to go.
Mhm. Well, and isn't that life, right? I mean, we're all going to have bad experiences, like for the duration of life with certain things, whether it's career or finances or health or friends or a significant other or school or a job environment, right? Or getting behind the wheel of a car and somebody rear ends you, God forbid, you know what I mean? Knock on some wood, but like, excuse my language, but like shit happens, right? And
Yeah.
I think, yes, we can prepare, right? Which is what we've talked about today in the sense of like, okay, let's process the feelings. Let's talk through it. If we can rehearse, kind of do some walking through, and then, you know, support around that. Like you said, making sure the kiddos, we get enough sleep and a good healthy breakfast and a good dinner the night before, right? Don't forget to feed your kids lunch like I did yesterday, and maybe even starting to kind of, you mentioned kind of reining in the sleeping schedule, but maybe even reining in some of the summertime treats, whether you've slippery sloped into like ice cream whenever you feel like it because you're chilling around the house, or maybe some I don't know, whether it's more of the summertime foods, maybe throwing in a little bit extra kind of dairy or grains right on your cookout, on your grill, so to speak, right? Just because it's fun and we're on vacation, maybe starting to rein some of that back in, supporting the body a little bit, right? Maybe some nice soothing baths, kind of supporting those little hearts and those little muscles as they're carrying those backpacks around, right?
Yeah.
And then just knowing that nothing's perfect, right? Nothing's perfect. I mean, I have my little utopia preschool, but I'll never forget one day some little 2-year-old bit my 2-year-old.
Yeah.
On
They
the
but they can
playground.
bite. They
They can
bite.
bite. They sure
Yeah.
can bite. So even in beautiful scenarios, right? Bad things happen. And like you
Yeah.
do have to course correct and you do have to figure out, how to support, how to get back on the horse, how to kind of restore those experiences in a way, like you said, it's not invalidating, but you can create new memories and move further away from the other memories and learning from them. And
Right.
there's a lot happening this time of year. I mean, I've heard so many parents say, oh, I can't wait for the routine to start again, and I think for others that like us, summer, we, as entrepreneurs and running the clinic here, our schedules, my husband and I, doesn't change whether Ellie's in school or out of school. And so for us, it adds more to our plates with drop off and pick up and extracurriculars, than summertime. So it doesn't feel like a relief for us, like it does for some parents, like, oh, get back to the schedule. For me, it's like, okay, add more to the schedule,
Yeah.
so there's a lot, I think, for everybody this time of year, but it's an exciting one for sure.
Yeah. And I think, for parents too, like, again, you need to I mean, because I have to adjust my sleep schedule too. Like I need to get to bed earlier so I can wake up earlier and be functioning. Because getting your kids to a 9 o'clock summer camp when you normally, you leave the house at 8:50, when you normally have to leave your house at, 7:50.
Yeah.
Like that's an hour of we moved at a different pace. It was just slower. I don't care what you do in the morning. You get dressed eventually. Like we'll make it to camp. And if we're late, who cares? Right. Like let's camp,
Yeah.
whatever. And so it's a change of pace versus the school of like, you need to get in the car now. Like we are late and there's traffic,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's for me also, like we talked a lot about kids and prepping kids, but right, we have to prep ourselves.
Yeah.
Again, we have our own experiences with school, our own worries about our kid. Maybe your kid, their teacher is someone you've heard about and you're a little nervous about how the year's going to go, right? There's so many layers to this. But
Right.
really also taking care of yourself and kind of keeping yourself in check and making sure you as the parent, right, is getting the rest and is, getting support and kind of, really taking inventory of what's your stuff, what's your kid's stuff, where do you intervene, where do you let this play out, how do you support, kind of all those things that are a little more nuanced. But yeah,
All the things.
all the things. Man, parenting's tiring.
I know life is tiring.
Lordy, it's a lot
Well,
to think about.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm glad we got to talk about this though. I mean, it definitely, I feel like even just talking about this has helped me kind of get more present with this season, because sometimes we go so much. I'm like, oh wait, what's next? Okay, school, let's go.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
lot. It's
It
a
is.
lot. Well, I hope all the kiddos out there and their parents have good, starts to the school year,
Yes, and if you guys,
whatever grade that might be.
that's right, all the way down to up. We didn't talk about the big kids. That's a whole nother thing too. But we're out of time for today, I think. But if
Yeah.
if you guys listen and there's questions that you have, or thoughts or comments, or if you get embarked on your school year and somebody's struggling in one way or another, leave us a comment. We are going to post these podcasts. We post them. Where do we post them, Claudia? Spotify? Where else?
They're on Apple Podcasts and
Okay.
maybe some others. I don't know. I don't actually know the details of how all this works. And Instagram, you might be able to find it. Yeah, you can usually find it on my Facebook page too, Mighty Oak Parenting.
Mighty Oak Parenting and Rob and Katie Truax are where you can find us on social media.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts, your feedback, questions, suggestions for more topics. And we wish you a happy back to school.
Yeah. Hope you guys have a smooth sailing on Wednesday. We'll be sitting tight for another week and a half. No, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. We're gonna be hanging out for a bit longer.
I don't know if I'm jealous or nanny boo boo.
Yeah. I think it'll go by quickly. So hopefully, I think my kids are ready. They're excited to do
Yeah, mine
something.
too.
Yeah, I think they're getting a little bored staring at me all day.
All right, you
All
guys,
right.
thanks so much for listening. And until next time.
All righty. Bye.